Hello, and welcome to Channel Zero TV with John and John. I'm John,
And I'm John.
and today we're going to talk to you about the paranormal phenomena of the Bridgewater Triangle. This is an area of southern Massachusetts, which has Bridgewater kind of roughly in its center, but also includes towns like Taunton, Berkeley, and Raynham, where allegedly huge amounts of supernatural phenomena have occurred over the years. John, you want to talk a little bit about the film clip we're going to show them?
Yes, this is the trailer for the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, which was released in 2013. It's directed by Aaron Cadeau and Manny Familare, who went out into places like the Freetown State Forest, down to the Dighton Rock, all these sort of locus areas of alleged paranormal activity. They interviewed people who had claimed to have had these experiences. It's a 90-minute documentary. It's remarkably measured and journalistic.
Okay, we'll let you get a sneak peek at the preview of this documentary, and then John and I will be back to talk about both the movie and the triangle.
In 1975, I moved from California to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I started picking up on this whole notion that there was an area in southeast Massachusetts that almost was a magnet of weird phenomena, and really noticed it was a triangle.
Whatever it is, we keep talking about this region for some reason.
I certainly think that the Hockomock Swamp serves as the epicenter of activity in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Off in the distance was an extremely large, man-like creature.
I saw something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. I saw what appeared to be the Sasquatch creature that I heard about.
Suddenly, I saw something walk. It was about 3 or 4 feet tall. It wanted to get me in its space. This is what I felt like.
A lot of people seem to think that because of King Philip's War, the Native Americans placed a curse on the Bridgewater Triangle region.
One of the greatest paranormal experiences occurred at Anawan Rock. As I turned around, I met the eyes of an older man.
The 1970s in particular were a time of very high UFO activity in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Jerry Lopes and I were heading down to the Raynham dog track, and all of a sudden the stars blotted out in the shape of an arrow as this thing passed overhead.
I almost felt like I could throw a rock at the thing. It seemed that close to me.
I pulled over the Raynham dog track parking lot. I'm right under this wharf as it's birthing these ships. What I seen was definitely not from this world.
A lot of criminal cult activity happened in the Freetown State Forest.
We had evidence that rituals taking place in the state forest. Then there was a huge amount of calves with the absence of blood.
This mausoleum was broken into, and juveniles actually stole the head out of here.
They believed that they could gain power by drinking from the skull.
Legends and stories about the Bridgewater Triangle will never stop. Nobody can argue that there isn't something very special about this area.
Something real happened here. There's no other way.
So I guess we should start by saying that some of the supernatural findings in this area are not necessarily bounded by this triangular region. There have been spottings of ghosts in Norton, etc. But it does seem that a collection of odd activities does seem to be concentrated in this part of Massachusetts. John, you want to talk about how you discovered the existence of the triangle and the movie about it?
Well, it all started, I took a day trip up to Portland, Maine to the International Cryptozoology Museum, which is a small museum devoted to, propagating the notion that Bigfoot exists, that there are sea serpents out there, that there are all sorts of heretofore unidentified species of creatures out there. And I sort of went up there on a lark, and I said to myself, it's going to be worth it just for the gift shop. Well, lo and behold, it did have a gift shop, and they were selling DVDs of a documentary called The Bridgewater Triangle, and I bought it sort of in a humorous spirit. I thought, well, this will be something very earnest and very, very sort of, cheap and silly. And instead, what I discovered was it was a very measured, journalistic, serious attempt to discuss paranormal phenomenon in this part of Massachusetts. You know, they went out in a very professional way, interviewed people who claimed to have had these experiences, marshaled their evidence, you know, discussed, you know, the possibility of fraud and fakery and things like that. And I was just very, very impressed with it. So impressed that as part of our Channel Zero film and video series, I outreached to the directors and the producers and secured the screening rights.
Yeah, we should mention that, Manny and Aaron showed up at Channel Zero at the Somerville Theater for, I guess, what was the New England premiere for this picture, right?
The Boston premiere. Yeah, we screened this July 22nd, 2016. With them there, they had a merchandise table. We had a wonderful question and answer session after the film. I had to turn people away. We sold out all 31 seats. It was plainly astonishing.
And I remember the guys were, very straightforward. I think it was Manny who said he was sort of skeptical about the whole thing, but wanted to keep an open mind. I think he finished up still relatively skeptical, but some of the stories swung him. And we should get into those stories because it's really it's not just UFO sightings. In fact, it's almost sort of a who's who catalog of supernatural phenomena from kind of the 60s on taking place. You've got alien sightings, you've got Bigfoot, you've got Indian ghosts, you've got insanguination. It's almost like sort of X-Files concentrated into of one part of the Bay State.
Yeah, no, it's an almost perfect, I call it the perfect Scooby-Doo menu, although it also includes things like satanic worship sites and slaughtered animals and things like that.
Yeah, though they weren't Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, that goes a little bit beyond Hanna-Barbera, admittedly. But it's funny. It tends to be the same 10 or 11 phenomenon.
That's what I found interesting about this is there were no sort of new monsters. I mean, the few were left out. I don't believe there was any sort of sea serpents or kind of Loch Ness monster equivalent. But there was nothing sort of brand spanking new that emerged from the triangle. No new creature, not even new sort of variation on aliens. They were still kind of I guess they're slightly furry, bug-eyed monsters, but it was fairly familiar territory.
Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of the nature of a lot of paranormal activity. It tends to come off that dozen or so item menu. My own personal theory is sort of a very vulgar, skeptical Jungian view is that, we live in a world that's hopefully defined by science, rationality, facts, interwoven with a certain amount of irony. And I think unconsciously, a lot of people would like to live in a universe that was somehow this thrillingly magical. I mean, it's a reaction, I think, to the civilization we built for ourselves, and the people would like to live in a universe where there was, maybe a sea serpent in the Westport River, where maybe Bigfoot does live in the Freetown State Forest, where Metacomet still haunts the Hockomock Swamp.
And I think it's also the sense of kind of unfinished business, right? You've got sort of King Philip's War, got a history in this region, which is not entirely the most flattering, and so the notion that the region might be cursed, I think, might have some resonance, even among people who are not familiar with King Philip's War or some of the things that actually took place on, but they can still spy ghosts.
Yeah, well, I mean, that tends to, historically tally with, events related to colonial interactions with Native Americans.
And it seems like there's also were some actual crimes that took place in this area, as you can imagine, all over the Bay State, all over the country. But some grisly murders. I don't doubt that there may have been some kids playing Satan worshipers and breaking into a crypt. But the notion that this translates to a sort of supernatural goat sucker wandering loose in the streets of Taunton, or flying saucers sort of buzzing over Norton, that I'm less sure of.
I would say I share your skepticism with regards to that. I mean, I've been down to Dighton to see the famous Dighton Rock, which is supposedly covered with hieroglyphics that nobody can translate. And I looked at it, and it's covered with all these strange carvings. And I remembered that local Native Americans, before the Pilgrims showed up, would routinely make fish hooks out of stone. And in order to sharpen the fish hooks on the stone, they had to rub it against a denser stone in order to get that sort of curvature and sharpness in it. And so there are stones all over New England with these grooves carved in them, and it's just simply that it was the Native Americans making fish hooks.
Oh, you're such a Scully.
Yeah, proudly so.
Okay, well, for any listeners who are in Massachusetts, it's certainly this is an area that is nice to walk around in, especially if that's what all you're allowed to do. So maybe you can stop down there and see for yourself. But in the meantime, we're going to leave off on the Bridgewater Triangle now and just say goodnight. For Channel Zero TV, I'm John.
And I'm John.
And we'll catch you next time.